Hello and welcome to Podsongs. I'm Jack Stafford and I interview inspiring people as inspiration for new songs. Today I'm saying thank you to someone who's helped me with my music promotion. Quite recently actually, he started a new website called Bandbuilder and I was one of the first people to sign up. He poured all his industry knowledge in there to help upcoming musicians, independent artists. He's moved to Japan. He's got a very interesting story about his life. Let me please introduce you to Todd McCarty. Hello, Todd. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Jack. Good to be here, man.
Well, great. Thanks for coming on. And I've known about you for a year now since I started using your Bandbuilder Academy, which is a tool for independent musicians, and it's been an incredible tool. I want to talk to you, really get into it about later in the podcast about that. But first, maybe you could just introduce yourself and tell us why you're living in Japan. You're an American.
That's right.
Emigrated to Japan. So how did that work out?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting time to be an American outside of America. I'll start with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been in Japan for 3 years. My wife is from Japan, and we live in her hometown called Matsuyama. So I met my wife in Los Angeles 10, 11 years ago. We've been married for 10 years, and we met in Los Angeles, and that's where our main home is. And this was an attempt to get our daughter, who was 5 at the time, and she's 8 now, to get her some Japanese language, to be, fluent in Japanese, not just speaking, but also literate and reading and writing. So we came 3 years ago with the intention of only staying 2 years, but circumstances have changed. We're still here. And we plan to be here for at least another year, I would think. But then back to Los Angeles where we have a home. But yeah, like I said, it's just an interesting time to be living in a foreign country when my country is in crisis. And there's just so many...
At the right time, no? I mean...
there's so many interesting things. Like, for instance... I can speak a little bit of Japanese, but I can't read and write in Japanese. So my news media is like the very simplified NHK Japanese news, which just tells the news. They don't embellish. They don't have a bias or anything. So I get the very basic news points, and then my smartphone feeds me, American news basically. I'm very in touch with America. Yeah, but I get so I actually know probably more what's going on in America than I do here. So it's really interesting, and the discussions that I get into with Japanese are very different than the discussions I get into with my expat friends here from all over the world.
So you speak any Japanese now, or?
A little bit, yeah. But I don't use it very much. So if you don't practice a foreign language, you lose it.
But can you read the signs? Can you
Yeah, I can read 2 of the 3 alphabets: the hiragana and katakana, which are pretty simplified. There's 56 or 54 characters of katakana and hiragana each. So that's over 100 characters I have to know. But then the kanji, which are the Chinese characters, I can't read very many of those at all. I'm not literate at all. I have to rely on my wife and daughter for a lot of that type of stuff.
Yeah, because if you'd moved to like Europe or somewhere, the alphabet's the same, it's the pretty words you can recognize, but there you're just at a blank slate now. I mean,
yeah. What the good news is with those hiragana and katakana characters, I can read all the signs on the streets and maps and get around because they keep all of that in basic language. So actually, I'm probably better off reading Japanese signs and maps than I am Italian or French.
Gosh. Well, you picked it up quick.
So
your daughter is fluent now? I mean, she's It's working.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Japanese was sort of her first language. My wife only spoke Japanese to her, her first in her formative years, and English became like at age 2, 3. I mean, she's verbal very early, but English became her dominant language when she was 2 through 5, and then we moved here. Within like 2, 3 months, she had just shifted all over to Japanese and was no problem
amazing, yeah.
sliding right in. And now she's reading, writing. She reads children's novels, at her grade level. She's a third grader here, and she reads better in Japanese than she does in English, though she can read English novels as well.
That's such a good thing you did. I mean, like, if the brain that age is just so pliable now, you can pick up these things, and it hasn't formed these shapes and stuff. So
yeah, and we've got a few more years left of that pliability, so we're going to take advantage of it.
And do you like the lifestyle over there? I mean, you like it's very.
I do. I was always interested in Japan from around my college years on, and I got into Japan through music, through the punk music scene, and it was just very natural, I guess, for me to end up married to a Japanese. Living over here is something I never thought I would do, but I'm so glad that we did this, for myself, for my daughter, for my wife. It was my idea, pushing rather than my wife. She actually lived in America longer than she lived in Japan, which is interesting. She came over right after high school and went to college, and actually like her senior year in high school in America, and did all of her college there, and worked and built a life in California. And but she didn't really want to come back because she was really enjoying it over there, and she wasn't sure how she would take it. But when she came back to Japan, she sort of fell in love with the country all over again. And I had been coming here every year for 15 years just through music. And
really?
Yeah.
Are you in the scene now? Are you have you made contacts in the music scene in Japan, and you're going to gigs? And well, maybe now, not now, but
very little. Most of my music consumption and my music business is focused in US, Canada, and Europe, Australia, English-speaking territories. But the artists that I was very active with 15 years ago are not as active, and I don't keep in touch with everybody as much as I'd like to, even though I'm here. One artist in particular, Eastern Youth, who was sort of my liaison to Japanese culture and the music scene here. I still keep in close touch with the bass player of that band, who's actually from the same prefecture or state that in Japan that I'm living in right now. So I see him every once in a while. Even though he lives in Tokyo. So it's just I love the lifestyle here. Like I said, it's just an interesting time to be here because the contrast between the way that America has handled the COVID crisis and Japan is completely opposite. And I'm in a very unusual place in the world, I think, because especially even in Japan, where Tokyo is still actively, 180, 200 cases a day are coming up, which is small in terms of what some countries are dealing with. But by Japan standards, that's still a serious problem. My prefecture, Ehime, announced that, we're COVID free right now. Like, there hasn't been a new case in over 3 weeks. There's nobody in the hospital from it. All of the cases are settled. So we're actually, knock on wood, we're out of it right now. Now, that doesn't mean anybody's letting their guard down. There's still hand sanitizer. They're taking your temperature everywhere you go with these temperature guns. Everybody has a mask. I'd say 98% of people are wearing a mask. Washing hands, like it's the same thing. But Yeah, we're
It gives
dealing
you,
with it differently here.
because a lot of Americans don't even own a passport. So, you kind of, to go and live in another country, and particularly an Asian country like that, and Japan is, must open your eyes so much to life back home, no?
It definitely does. It's something I think about daily, and yeah, I accept Japan for what it is and Japanese culture, and it's a very complex society, and I accept America. Of course, I have my critiques and my views on things, but it's a very complex culture. When you talk about America these days, you really have to be careful, like which America are you talking about? And it really, it's just an interesting perspective to be here right now.
But you want to go back?
Um, I think personally, like it's I have to think about my family, because there's what I want, there's what my wife wants, there's what my daughter thinks she wants, or
Well,
what she desires, or perceives as a better place. So we make a family decision together. But personally, I think I'd like to go back to see friends, family. I mean, I was back in January before COVID hit, but also to catch up with my network in Los Angeles, in other cities, and my friends and family there. But I think I'd like to come back, like 2 or 3 years. So I just like to make it a short temporary stay and then probably come back. But we'll see. I never try to predict where I'm going to be 3 to 5 years from now.
was that one of the reasons because probably should go back a few steps. So you were living there. You were a record label executive for Sony, so which is many people's fantasy job now. I mean, a record label, working with all these bands, traveling around the world. I mean, how was that?
Yeah. Yeah. So Sony is a brand and company everybody recognizes. But in the big picture of things, my 20-year, 25-year music career, Sony was only about a year and a half to 2 years of it. Prior to Sony, I was in one place for 13 years at Fearless Records, which is a California-based large independent punk label, rock, punk, metal, hard rock, and I was the general manager of that company for a long time, and also doing sales, managing all the major accounts like Apple and Spotify and the big physical retailers, and managing a staff and managing, working with our artist roster and developing artists and putting all of the skills that I learned as a musician, as a tour manager, and actually I was doing music sales before I went to Fearless, but I put it all together there, and I think that's what led me to get the job as a senior vice president at Sony. Was they liked what I was doing at the independent label. Most of my career, 95% of my career, was spent developing artists and working with mostly independent artists. And while at Sony, I wasn't working with the big superstars. They wanted me for my developing artist skills. And that's what I did there. So I really enjoyed it. They were great to me, especially being a Japanese company. When I told them I was quitting and moving to Japan for family reasons, they were like, great. Well, can't you still work for us? So they were like nice enough I was ready to just take zero paycheck and be out the door. And they made my move very nice and kept me on, part-time, but a lot of hours, but, while I moved over here. So it softened the landing for me.
I forgot they were Japanese. I forget.
Yeah. So it was really nice. And, but I guess the story of me getting into the music industry and really enjoying, my daily work, always goes back to, I don't know, maybe when I was 7 or 8 years old, watching parades in my community, and hearing those marching bands and the drums hit me. So I became a drummer and never looked back, really. I mean, music was the one and only thing I always wanted to do. I think I'm lucky like that. A lot of people have to search for what they want to do. I've never had to do that. I've always been in music, whether it was in my school bands and then starting punk bands at age 13, 14 years old. And then I was a drummer and having a playing career. I call it a career loosely. We were playing for, less than $100 most nights, but it was something I did always, and I identified as a drummer first, and it's sort of like the music business guy in all of the bands that I was in. And
it's cliche. Normally the drummer is the one that you have to spell everything out to. So
that's right. Yeah. But yeah, I guess I bucked the trend there. I wasn't the only one there. My best friend, to this day, he was in some of my first bands, and he and I were both doing the business stuff for the bands. But we put out our own records, pressed our own vinyl, booked our own tours, did all of that. I think I had the good fortune where I lived at the time as a youngster was Washington, D.C. in the late 70s, early 80s, and into the 90s, living in Washington, D.C., coming up at a time when the D.C. music scene, particularly the punk and hardcore scene in Washington, D.C., was very much shaped who I've become, both musically, like my taste in music, but also, Washington, D.C. is the political center of America, and growing up in that community really formed a lot of my views, my worldview. We were always talking politics, always sort of had a global mindset. History was around me because I was born in the state of Virginia, in a place called Williamsburg, which was one of the first settlements when the English took over America. And there was, Revolutionary War history there. And then there was Civil War history in America, all like battlefields surrounding the neighborhoods and the schools where I grew up. And then also being 7 miles from the city center of Washington, D.C. with, all the politics going on. That was, part of my upbringing. And then the music scene, for those that don't know, there was a community of DIY punk rockers there under a record label called Discord Records. And there was some bands like Minor Threat and Fugazi and Rites of Spring who were very popular from that scene. Henry Rollins of Black Flag came out of that scene. So there was a rich cultural music history there. And I got to be a part of that, and it really gave me a DIY ethic of, put out your own records, do music that makes you feel good, not because it's popular or, just part of the mainstream. It was a counterculture in a lot of ways, but it was also just a really good community experience, and it taught me that's important, not just the product and the albums and the songs, but the community in which we were making music was really part of it. So I think that was unique for me. And just to tie that back to Japan, this band Eastern Youth, who I got to know from trading cassette tapes back and forth in the mail with a pen pal in Japan, this pen pal turned me on to a band called Eastern Youth in Japan, who was sort of like the mirror, not the mirror image, that's a bad term, but they were sort of disciples of the Washington, D.C. hardcore scene, but they were living in the northern part of Japan, Hokkaido, this island in Japan that had a thriving punk scene that was sort of like a parallel of the Washington, D.C. punk and hardcore scene. So I became friends with those guys and started coming to Japan every year. And I think that there was that connection through punk music and the DC community. and that it extended to Japan. And they didn't just like it for the music, they liked it for that community and that sort of realness and the importance of the music that they were making. There was a connection there. It was really unique. And that's how I got sort of into Japan, I guess.
So you've really seen, even though you're still very young, you've seen the whole gamut from trading cassette tapes right now until, nothing physical. So how was it in the early, way back then? You think that really gave you that taught you, because you've created this Bandbuilder, which we're going to get into, but you've had this foundation. You know what it's like to being a struggling musician. You know how it is to have your, to send out demos and wait for the phone to ring.
That's right.
So what was that like then when you made the shift from a musician to working as a record label? You still have the sympathy?
Yeah, I really wanted to make a go of it as a drummer. I think until I was about 25, 26 years old, and I'd been playing in bands since I was 14, 15. So for a long time, I was just, I'm going to make it as a drummer, and I just pursued that, playing in bands and trying to sell records and doing all the media and press and pressing up the records and selling the records into shops, like literally consigning the CDs and vinyl into record stores, like walking in there and saying, can you take 10 of these? And if you sell them, you pay me this. So getting all of that experience. But I liked business. I think maybe because my father influenced me there. He was a businessman. And I just liked the idea of being a musician and earning a living from it. So I wanted to make sure that I could, after I would pursue my drumming career as much as possible, but I wanted to be able to fall back, not on just something. I wanted to fall back into music so that I didn't have to leave the craft that I loved. And I didn't. There was a long period there, about 10 years, where I was a drummer and a music business guy. I never quit drumming until my hands gave out. I got some, carpal tunnel type issues in my hands. But so I guess my transition was doing all the business, booking all the tours, and then I wanted to earn a living doing that. So I started, doing. Well, there's a little bit of a thing in between that really helped me. I went to college, and I had this expectation from family and friends that you have to use that degree. I got a history degree, which went along with my whole global world, view. I wanted to learn about the world. But, how are you going to use it? What are you going to do after college? What are you going to do? And I thought I have to get a real job. There was a lot of people pressuring me to get a real job, and music wasn't going so well. It was a grind. And so I gave into that a little bit. I said, okay, well, I'll give it a try. Well, not right away, actually. Funny thing is, right after I graduated college, I always wanted to drive a taxi cab. I just thought it was the most interesting job in the world. Like, I thought it'd be so cool to be able to talk to different people and get to know different types of people, sort of break up the monotony of suburbia, I guess, and talk to all these different people that would come in my cab. Right after college, I got a job driving a taxi cab in Orlando, Florida, where I went to the university. And one of the first people I picked up was like my favorite college professor. Was one of my first cab fares. And he got in my cab. I picked him up from like a medical center. He was having some work done or whatever. And he got in my cab and he was like, Todd, what the hell are you doing driving a taxi cab? You just graduated 3 weeks ago and you're driving me around in a cab. And we had a laugh about it. And I told him, I was just genuinely interested in it. Like I chose this. It wasn't something I have to do. I wanted to do it. I'm interested in it. So I did that for about a year. But then there was a lot of the pressure, like, oh my God, he's wasting his life. He's a musician, taxi cab driver from the family. So I went and I got a real job. And that was really good for me, actually. I worked for a company that taught me sales, and they were a publicly traded, pretty big company. And I was wearing a suit 2 days a week and going and selling telecommunications packages to small and medium-sized businesses. And I learned the skill of selling. And I took that after a year. I quit that job and I started selling music for record labels. And that was my transition. If I couldn't at the moment do drumming and my band wasn't going so well, I still wanted to be in music. So I quit the corporate job and I started selling music for like 15 different record labels. I just started calling record labels and seeing who needed my help, and started getting their music into stores. And I ran into Fearless Records. I should say also, before that, I was a tour manager. So I balanced selling CDs into record stores with tour managing about 7-8 months of the year. So I was on the road in a new city every day, which was great. I loved being on the road and touring. But after a while, one of my clients ended up being Fearless Records that I was selling their music into stores for. And they hired me as their sales guy full time. And I moved from Washington, D.C. to California. And so that was sort of my transition. I was like, okay, now I'm doing it. I had the confidence in my sales abilities. I got a job selling, music, and then, turned that into a real music industry job in Los Angeles, moved out there, and quickly, showed my stuff and became the general manager of the label, and loved it. I mean, just working with all the different artists, really trying to make a difference, and using sort of maybe living vicariously through the musicians as well. I grabbed every drummer I could that came through the office and picked his brain about what type of gear he had, and bugged the shit out of all the drummers. But I just really enjoyed it. I was doing it. I was doing my dream job. I was working with musicians, still playing in bands in Los Angeles with some friends, but not able to tour as much with those bands as much anymore because I had a desk job.
Those indie labels there was just so much passion there, isn't there, for their artists, for the music.
There was, and you were doing a lot of things at an indie label. So when I first started, I think we had 5, 6, 7 people there. So I had to do a lot of different things. So it was good that I had all those DIY skills because I had the experience to do all the jobs at a record label. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
Like what did you have to do?
Like we learned social media very early, advertising. We even got involved. I got involved in, the video treatments and the creative type stuff and album cover art and manufacturing and international distribution and, regular CD distribution and working with our distributor and selling records, but marketing and promotion. And, I was made the general manager pretty quick. So I was running marketing meetings probably a year into the job, less than that. And when we were growing the company, we had a few hits pretty quickly into my time there. We had a multi-platinum global hit #1 record around the world with Plain White T's Hey There Delilah. And when a little indie label, we had some decent sized artists like At the Drive-In, and we had the Aquabats, and we had some like these compilations, punk cover song compilations, and they were pretty big. But when an indie label with 7 or 8 people has a global hit in 20 countries, you have to learn the music business really quick. So that was just really formative for me. It taught me everything that I didn't know and I needed to know about the music business. I had to learn from like 2006 to 2008. And it was a real crash course, managing not only the ownership of the masters and selling the music and doing all the marketing, but we also had the publishing on that song. So we had to build a publishing company for that as well. So it was really an education for me, and it grew the company from, like those 7 people to 15, and shortly after that 20 people. So we grew from that and parlayed that success into some other big successes as well.
So that gave you a completely new perspective, because you come from the band side, and now you're working on because speaking as a musician myself, we can be quite ungrateful people, no? Thinking that it's quite owed to us, and a lot of bands spend first half of their career desperate to be signed by a record label, and then the next half criticizing the label, how they're not doing enough. So did you experience things like that?
Maybe a little bit, but I think the founder of and president of that label, Bob Becker, I think he had a good philosophy of signing artists that he felt he could have a good relationship with, and like a mutual respect and a good partnership with. And the deals had that spirit in them, so that I'm sure there was animosity and some artists that felt the label, didn't give them enough attention or whatever, but it wasn't that bad, because a lot of record labels that we were competing with, or just independent labels, felt they needed to put out a lot of records, and they had large rosters of artists. They were working 15, 20 projects, 50 projects at once. We had a very small roster, so the artists on the label got very boutique service. Like they got our attention for longer than most labels could say, and I think that most artists got that. But of course, we weren't batting 1,000. We had a pretty good batting average as far as success rate. I'd say half the bands on our roster were commercially successful, maybe more. There weren't, I'm sure the ones that were on the bottom half of that roster didn't feel so good about it. But no, I felt the artists worked hard. The ones that were successful worked really hard. Interestingly, I can say this with confidence, that the most successful artists that I worked with at the time, or any time in my career, usually were working as hard or harder than the record label staff. Like the label was challenged to keep up with them. They were really on their game. So huge respect for
and that's what made the difference between it wasn't just the songs or how they were on stage, but this work they did behind the scenes.
Yep. Yeah, and that made it really easy to handle those situations when I did encounter maybe some artists that were disgruntled or weren't happy, or just venting their failure on other people. Was like, I could make a direct A/B comparison between the successful artists and not just the artists, but the teams around them, the manager, the agent, the PR, all the different elements in the team, everybody working harmoniously together and working hard and pushing each other in a positive way, versus the teams that were just sitting back and waiting for something to happen, and it wasn't always like that. Even the ones that might not have failed, it wasn't like they were sitting back. Everybody was working pretty hard. Some projects just didn't work. But yeah, seeing the successful bands, how they operated and working in close quarters, hard together, it made it very easy to deal with the ones that weren't so successful, because the contrast was very different.
It's such because when you're having to use these different sides of your brain. You're in you write the song, you're in the studio, all this creative, and then you make this beautiful piece of art, and then okay, here it is, I've done it. I can, but that's kind of just a small part of the process.
It is a small part, but it's the most important part. And when you put it into those terms, those were probably the most uncomfortable moments between record label and artist, is that moment when you put your heart and soul into a recording, and you've got the highest hopes for it, and you turn it into a record label, and they sort of pick it apart or critique it. And it's rather than just accept it.
How dare they?
Yeah. Rather than just accept it with open arms, you know, and that happened sometimes too. There were albums that were delivered sometimes where it was just like, okay, thank you very much. We love every bit of this. We know exactly what we need to do. Let's get to work. But that was the minority. There was a lot of records that were turned in that we had to sort of, you know, get real about and figure out, okay, this is a little bit different than we expected. It's not a problem, but we got to put our thinking caps on and work our way through this to get to where we all want to be. But man, yeah, those are tough decisions. That's probably the part of the business that, luckily I didn't have to deal too much with that. That was the A&R's job. And I was more in label management and sales and marketing. But even today, running Bandbuilder, and I have, you know, my music consultancy for artist coaching, and just giving advice is what I do now for artists. I give them advice, and still the bit I struggle with the most is critiquing the music. They ask me for my opinion or my advice on the music. And as a musician who's created, I know what it's like to turn something in and have it be judged or not liked or picked apart, even just picked apart. I want people just to, you know, love it for what it is. But when you have to think about things in marketing and, you know, think of things in terms of commerce and objectively, there is some need to critique things sometimes. And I still don't like doing that. I just, it doesn't, you know, the intersection of art and commerce is a dirty place, and I'm not comfortable there.
It is a strange industry now. Yeah, but maybe with this, now's a good time to go on to this Bandbuilder, which you've made, because you had all this foundation, you had all this, you learned everything from running an independent record label and then working for a major label, and then you decided to help as many musicians as possible by creating this platform, this roadmap with all these different parts of the facets of the music industry. So maybe you could talk us a bit about how you came into that and you created this Bandbuilder.
Sure. Yeah, the Bandbuilder was something I started thinking about as the company I was working for, Fearless Records, was considering a change. Like we were actually selling the company, and you know, not from a place of weakness. The company was growing and very strong, but just wanted more resources and wanted a bigger partner, be a part of a larger organization for the resources. And I had been doing it for 13, 14 years at that point. And I was like, you know, I don't know if I want to be at one place, you know, for my whole music career. Maybe that's not healthy. Maybe I should think about doing something else. So I thought, well, I could start a record label. I could maybe manage artists, and it just didn't feel right. I felt like, I asked myself, what did I really like about the music business? And it was working with the artists, developing artists, and educating. I really like to educate the new artists coming in, and we worked with a lot of new artists, you know, artists that had very small fan bases, if any. And that was the most exciting part for me, is teaching the artists how to build a good business and build success and build a fan base. So when I thought about all these other things that I could do, I said, well, I could do those, but I've already done the record label. I've already been a tour manager. You know, I've been a musician, so I want to do something different. And I thought, education, that's what I want to do. That's what I'm most passionate about. So I thought of how am I going to do that? I don't even know the musicians. Like my industry network was big, but I didn't know lots of unsigned artists or developing artists, just the ones that are on my record labels. So I had to go and build an audience. And the way that I did that was through starting a blog and just giving free advice to musicians on a blog called heatonthestreet.com. And with that, people started sharing it around and stumbling on it and reading it. And
yeah, that's how I first heard of you.
Yeah, I got to be known through that, and people started passing these articles that I was written around saying, here's some good advice from a record label guy, and it doesn't seem like BS or there's like a sales angle. It was just good advice for free. And the trade-off was I got to meet tens of thousands of musicians that way. And some of them I asked, or they asked me, could you do consulting, like coaching? So I became an artist coach that way. And the blog attracted musicians to where they wanted to hire me to coach them through their fan building process, their release process, just running a good business. And I really enjoyed that for a few years. But Bandbuilder was always the real end goal for me, that I wanted to teach a system, like a step-by-step system, because doing it in an hour call once every 2 weeks or once a week or 4 times a month, in those 4 hours a month, you can't really do too much, and it's a lot of follow-up. So I wanted to have video training where they could just consume it all, and basically like a university, like have all subjects, not just like a few different tactics or tricks, like how to get big on Spotify or how to get big on YouTube, or how to get social media followers or how to advertise. I wanted to have everything. And so that's what Bandbuilder was about. And now I don't really look at myself as a music industry guy or a record label guy or a music sales guy. I look at myself as a music business educator. Like I'm in education business. I publish articles. I still publish articles on heatonthestreet.com. And then the content in Bandbuilder, which is, hours and hours of video and coursework and workbooks and all these resources. That's content that I created. So I'm like a publisher and an educator. So I'm basically like publishing educational materials. So that's how I identify myself, not as a drummer anymore, not as a music business guy or record label guy, but as publishing music education content. And the goal of it all is to help musicians learn how to build a fan base the right way, a sustainable fan base that's going to come back and provide an income to support a real, career, and to treat it like a business and be able to earn a career from it, so that you can put down the side job. A lot of musicians, developing artists, have to have side jobs, and I would like them to be able to be sustainable, earning a living just through music. And that's, because that's what I wanted to do. As a young musician, that was my first goal, make a living doing music. And sure enough, I mean, I've gotten comments from people in Bandbuilder that are like, this is great content for my music career, but I can also apply this to my food truck business or my whatever business. Like the stuff that they're doing outside of their music career, they're applying the stuff they're learning inside the academy. And that's really cool compliment. It's the best thing I like to hear is that, I'm teaching people good business skills as well.
Yeah. That was actually my next question, is what should be the goal of an independent musician? Because it used to be get signed, get with a record label, and the rest will be taken care of. So, but you're saying it's, you as an independent musician, you can be a self-sustaining, self-employed businessman running your band business.
Yeah. I mean, it helps with the team. It is called Bandbuilder because that's where I came from. And when I set out to create it, I actually was envisioning bands that had a team of 3, 4, 5 people at a minimum, like the musicians involved in the band, and splitting the job duties of the business between a team. But actually, the realization has been that the majority of artists out there are actually more like solo artists and people that are trying to make a living through music on their own as an independent, like solo independent artist. So a lot of the content that I'm developing going forward is with both the band in mind, but also with the solo artist. And
there's so much to do now. I mean, it's
there's so much to do. So if you are a solo artist, you know, there is a lot you have to do, and you do need help, whether it's free help from family members, loved ones, you know, cousins, nephews, nieces, all that stuff, or interns, or, you know, apprentices and like paid internships, or virtual assistants. But you do need help, because you'll get to where you want to get a lot faster if you have a team. I'm not saying you need an artist manager. That helps, of course, but an artist manager wants to make a living, you know, and if there's not a lot of money being made, you're not going to get the best manager that's looking to make money quickly. So I'm not saying you need an artist manager right away, but you need a friendager or a fanager, I call them, you know, like somebody that's going to help you along the way in those early days and pick up some of the work. If you're a solo artist, for bands, I recommend they self-manage for a while to get to know the business and get comfortable with what their business is before inviting somebody in to manage that business. But the goal for independent musicians, I think a good goal, I'm very numbers focused. I have a sales background, and I set goals, and I like numbers. So I would say try to build a following of 10,000 fans. 10,000 followers on Spotify is not easy to do. 10,000 social media followers doesn't seem like a very difficult thing. It is, but it seems attainable. But actually getting followers on Spotify or Apple Music is a lot harder, because people aren't accustomed to doing that. They're not accustomed to hitting that follow button. And if they do, those are real fans. So I think
that's a non-lie that you can't manipulate that statistic. No, the followers.
That's right. Yeah, there's no faking it. I mean, maybe there's some ways I don't teach that, but yeah, get 10,000 followers, and I'm talking about real people that like you. Even if you aim, you know, just try to get 1,000. You know, and I would say for email addresses, which are even harder to get than Spotify follows, I would try to get 1,000 emails or 2,000 emails, and build a relationship with your fans.
That was something I learned because you divide the roadmap into where you cover everything. You've got planning your releases, A and B campaign, tools and resources, how to do the free traffic, the paid traffic. But yeah, you do really focus, say that the email addresses is something that it should be your focus, because you know, Facebook is, you know, since the algorithm changed, things you post, your fans don't see unless you boost, you do a very interesting, or you pay to boost it, or but you know, I remember MySpace, and you know, spending hours on there, because people did get record deals based on their MySpace page, you know, their number of followers and their fans, and it was, you know, so people put a lot of, but you know, after that faded away, if you'd converted those to email addresses, you would be in a much better position now, wouldn't you?
That's right. Yeah. And I think what MySpace taught the bands and the music community is, you know, build on your own land. Don't build on somebody else's real estate, because once MySpace closed their doors, there was no land anymore. Your fan base was gone. And you had to work very hard to get them over to, you know, Facebook and your email list. But you want to, you know, control the way people consume your music. You don't want to just leave it to, you know, the partners that are out there, whether it's Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Google, you know, internet searches, and you know, these strange profiles coming up. You want to direct people to your website. You want to communicate with people and nurture your fan base, and not wait around for somebody else to do it, or for, you know, an algorithm on Spotify to reach out to your fan. You gotta be there first. You gotta show up. You gotta show up for your fans every day. Not every day, but
as artists, we're paying to promote Spotify. You know, a lot of my fans don't have Spotify, but I'm telling them, oh, you have to go to you have to go to, if you want to listen to my music, you must go to Spotify. So therefore you must sign up with them. I'm paying that to promote. I'm
That's
choosing
right.
but Spotify could, disappear, or another better model could come up, and then I've invested all that. So this shifting these continental plates are shifting around, and it's difficult.
Yeah, yeah. No, you make an interesting point. A lot of people don't realize, but iTunes, if you remember, they had a few billboards in major cities that had like people with the earbuds and these colorful billboards, but there wasn't a lot of iTunes advertising on television, in magazines. The advertising was the artists going, say, buy it on iTunes, 99 cents on iTunes. Like, the artist community built iTunes, 100%.
Wow.
And it's the same with all the other platforms. Without the artists constantly saying go to these platforms, they wouldn't exist. So let's hope they treat the musicians the way they should be treated.
Because you say in the Spotify originally started out as a disruptor. They were quite independently minded. No, they had good ethics at the start. Was that right?
I would say so. Yeah, I think they saw something in the freemium model. I think they sort of stumbled into it more than they set out to have, what Spotify has become. I don't think they originally thought this freemium model, getting people to have the entire global catalog of music for free. I don't think they calculated that would be a piracy killer. But if you look back, it was like, at the time, the music industry was competing with free, like a lot of industries are now. And we had Apple, the CD market was crumbling. Apple was sort of the breadwinner for the music industry. And it, even with the 200 million credit cards, the rest of the world was stealing music for free. Like, they weren't paying.
Yeah, I've forgotten all about that.
Yeah. And Apple was the breadwinner in the music business. And that's where the money was being made. And when Spotify came, the music industry still was dealing with piracy. Like, we were still fighting it.
About that.
Yeah, I mean, people used to, like have private streams from music. Record labels were so terrified that the albums were going to leak on the internet before they would get put on iTunes. So when Spotify came around, like, it actually, the freemium model killed that, not killed it, but it really put a dent in the piracy. Like, there was a lot of people that were like, oh, I don't have to go on the BitTorrent sites anymore and risk getting a virus on my computer. I can just go to Spotify and get it for free. That, looking back, that actually really helped, because then we had both. We had good money coming in from Apple at the time, and then the piracy got better. Like, it dried up a lot because the freemium model came in, and we started making a little bit of money off Spotify in those early days. But they took that message as, like, that goodwill, that they were a freemium model, but they were cutting into piracy. And that's what got Spotify through those first difficult years of everybody hating them for giving away the music for free. But I think there was something to it. And then, of course, the paid model with Spotify, they kept saying that this would happen, that eventually, if enough people got in, that the economics would work. And that's still questionable whether they work. They work for some, but maybe not all. But they are the breadwinner now. I think is the global revenue. They're the leader in overall dollar sales.
How fast that shifts, though. How fast this shifts. It's incredible. So if somebody came along with another app and said, we're going to pay the artists 10 cents as play, or a bit more, whatever, a better play than 0.00 whatever Spotify plays, and all the artists go, okay, and they send their fans to there, is there the chance of that, and a better model coming along, a competitor?
Yeah, that's interesting, because there are services out there. I can't remember which one, but one of them pays a lot better. I'll just, this might not be accurate, but I just believe it was like Napster or one of those oddball DSPs was paying like, almost a penny per stream. It was like 0.7% of a penny, 0.7 cents. And it still exists today. Anybody can go subscribe to Napster, and the musicians could send everybody there right now if they wanted. But I don't know that the musicians have 100% of the power to say, everybody go over here, we're paid better. I mean, that's what Tidal was, and it didn't work. Tidal didn't gain traction. So I think it would work if the platform had all the features that people love about, Spotify. And Deezer is another one that is very popular with their core, their sort of power users. Like the user experience of Deezer is really good. Then Spotify has a really good user experience. Apple has theirs. And I think, people are happy with the product. If there was one that people were happy with that had a much better rate, I think it would just sweep up very quickly. It could be as quickly as like a MySpace to Facebook shift. Like if it got rave reviews and everybody was loving it and it was paying the musicians 5x or 10x what Spotify was, I think
surely
Spotify
that's the
would be
next thing though, because I can't predict the future. I don't know what's coming next, but I do know it's going to change and change very quickly, because if you look at the history, there's been a history of change and accelerating change. So, and you're in a position where your finger on the pulse. So you don't have an idea of what is coming next, what we'll be doing in 2 years, or.
I don't. I sort of focus on how to maximize the 3 or 4 best things right now, because I work with a lot of independent artists with small teams, and they have to focus on sort of a smaller set of things. But when I do sort of wax about the things that are coming down the pipe, the thing that excites me the most is the sort of the artificial intelligence and the sort of voice activated devices, like the Amazon Echo type things, all of those type of things. I do feel like, in the near future, we'll get to a point where we're utilizing that stuff in an interesting and fun way, an interactive way. Maybe live streaming will be a better experience, some form of live streaming. But right now, I'm not a believer in the live streaming. Coronavirus has helped the live streaming platforms, and you've got this like tipping culture and like the video game community with Twitch and the Patreon type thing and that model. So I think that there's something there, but I just don't think the experience, like there's people that will tell you they love listening to music on Spotify or Apple Music, or they just really prefer YouTube and that experience. But there's not a lot of people saying, I love live streaming. I love watching live music and live performances on video, poorly compressed video. Like the audio quality is just not there. So I don't really think it's going to be there. I think it's going to be more of a, an audiophile experience or some sort of cool interactive artificial intelligence type thing, an interactive experience. That's going to be like the next big thing in music. But as far as, another iteration of Apple Music or Spotify, I think we will see one. I think there will be one that comes along that makes a play.
Are they Spotify going to sign artists directly and things like that? Or?
I'm not. I mean, of course they've made attempts to do that. I'm not a believer that they'll ever make a meaningful play to sign artists, because that threatens their partners.
Right.
Anything that Spotify is publicly traded now. They have to think about their risk. And from an investor point of view, having three main suppliers of your product is pretty risky if you think about it. If one of the major labels, Universal, Sony, or Warner, was to just decide they don't want their content on Spotify anymore, that really hurts your product. It really hurts it. If two take their content off, you're left with 33% of the music. That's catastrophic for a publicly traded company. So they can't afford to, my opinion is they can't afford to anger their distribution partners and by threaten them, like, we're going to start signing artists. We just want to tell you we're going to start signing artists. Well, that threatens their three major partners. So I don't think they can really cross that line with those three major suppliers, not anytime soon. So I don't think that's the model for Spotify going forward. Of course, they want to try to make more money. I think that their attempts to try to monetize from the artists and the content owners any more than they already are now. I know they're chipping away at it, but that's the wrong approach. It's going to have to come from outside, maybe the podcast advertising revenue, or some other maybe they because people forget iTunes podcasting was free. It was totally free. And now Spotify actually has a revenue stream from podcasts that Apple Music was ignoring or didn't have, or iTunes ignored for years.
And it's signing big artists, big hosts, big presenters.
Yeah. So maybe that's a more, more of the future for them, but trying to claw away at the rights owner and artist side of the revenue is just, there's no future in that for Spotify, in my opinion. That would be the death of them. That would cause the creator community to find another partner, like you mentioned. So eventually, they can only chip away so much.
So with Bandbuilder, you still recommend that we concentrate all our streams as independent artists. We concentrate them in one place because we don't send them to all these different players. So Spotify is the best place to send them. And is that so? With all these tools we have, you mentioned in the roadmap, and through your history as a musician and a record, do you think this is the best time to be an independent musician or the worst time?
Great question. I have to think about it a little bit, but I'm very quickly ready to say it's the best time ever. For a lot of reasons that. I also want to say, like, I feel like a lot of people will tell you, oh, music was so much better, and when I was 18 or 20 or back in my day, music was so much better. But I disagree. The playing technically has gotten so much better. Maybe you could argue artistically, it's always better when you were younger, but I disagree. I think the quality of the music is getting better. The quality of the recordings, the playing is getting better because kids have better tools to learn their craft when they're younger. They can learn a lot from video training and YouTube, and learn from their favorite musicians online very easily. There's so many tools to learn. You can be your own audio engineer much easier these days, and like, the pipelines of distribution are getting put in the artist's hands a little more directly these days, and so, the goal, like we said, you can build your own fan base on your own. You get your first 10,000 fans or 5,000 fans, and then try to build a team around you. So I don't know. I think it's the best time to be a musician because it's a lot easier to get your career going on your own than it used to be. Because the industry doesn't really want to have much to do with you until you can prove that you have a good lemonade stand, a good business, and people like your music. And in the old days, you had to put a band in a van and spent a lot of money and put them on the road for 2 or 3 years before you knew if anybody liked them or not.
Mm-hmm.
Like record labels really had a lot of risk back then because you might like them, like, but you haven't tested it, so, like with a broad audience. So you'd have to really put them out there for many years before you figured out if anybody liked them or not. But
well,
now,
with the expense also of, I remember you said that you spent all night putting, albums in boxes and shipping out. And I remember when I was starting out in Amsterdam, I was independent artist as well, and I would launch an album, and then you have to get a single on the radio. You have to pay to print a single to send to the so you wouldn't sell any singles, but you had to pay whatever 1,000 euros plus postage to send a physical product.
That's right.
So okay, we're earning less from Spotify, but our costs have gone dramatically down. We don't have to pay to print this physical, and it was not just the album, but these singles. If you have a record label, you're printing 4 times as many singles as you are albums, which not many. They don't hardly justify the cost when you sell them, do they? Did they back then?
Yeah, it wasn't a high profit item. The compact disc, especially in America, like in Europe and Asia, like compact discs were a lot more expensive in places like Japan and Germany and UK. In America, they were very cheap.
Because the singles, they cost the same price to make as an album, but you sell
that's
for a fraction of the price.
Even singles and EPs were even less profitable. You couldn't charge as much, but the costs were the same. So absolutely, yeah, it was. I'm one of the people that actually liked the format change from physical product to digital product. It was more efficient, more profitable. It was a good thing, except vinyl. With the exception of vinyl, I just love the format.
Yeah.
And I'm actually, and on a positive note, vinyl has been growing at a crazy rate for the past 15 years. So,
and you've got t-shirt sales and merchandise. You're basically a t-shirt seller if you're on tour now. So, and they're cheap to make. So, but just because the musicians always complain about the low rate from Spotify and that, but if you put it against the fact that you don't have to tour, or if you do, you don't have to do those years to find the good band, and you don't have to pay for all these singles and these albums. I mean, you make your profit in your costs now as well.
That's right. And I think the economics of the streaming world got off on the wrong foot, and then it could have been different, but it is what it is now. And the 1,500 song streams equal one album. So financially, like the price of is the same. So
it's bad we get paid per stream, not per second, though. Yeah, or per minute.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Because with the radio, if you had Bohemian Rhapsody, you earn a lot of money compared to Song 2 by Blur, for example. A short song, you on the radio, you get paid for the amount of time that you're on the air. But with Spotify, you get paid per play. So if you have a song with an album with 12 songs on, and people listen to it, and if it's got 24 songs, they'll get paid. You get paid twice as much. So I wonder why some of the major artists haven't changed their format and changed, have 30 songs on an album, and the shift between songs can be quite small, and have split up with instrumentals and have more songs on an album.
Yeah, I think the streaming services and the algorithms that drive them are very single focused. They're not very album focused. If you look at, it's very playlist driven. And even like when you get music recommended to you, like Apple Music is a little bit better about recommending albums, But Spotify's recommendation engine is usually recommending songs or artists, not necessarily the album format. So there's really no guarantee from an artist that if they put out more songs that they'll get more looks from there, because the algorithms are designed to sort of grab onto the cream of the crop and the best. So they're still only going to see, the best songs and not just a volume of songs.
So do you think like people are still living in the past when they're thinking about albums? I mean, releasing an album every 2 years, if you're a painter and you okay, here's my 12 songs for 12 out paintings. I'm just going to sell these and then I'm not going to do anything for the next. I'm just going to go on.
Yeah, I would say the tendency with technology and having these, information spewing devices at our hip all the time, unfortunately, it's driving most people to consume songs and not put the emphasis on albums anymore. And that kind of hurts. I'm somebody who likes, who I should say enjoyed listening to albums. Actually, when I think about it, I prefer to listen to albums, but I've become in the habit of not listening to albums anymore. Not because I remember making a choice. I never decided one day, I'm not going to listen to albums anymore. I just want to listen to songs and singles and playlists. Like I never made that choice that I can remember. It just happened. And it's kind of sad because I don't really listen to albums anymore because I'm a Spotify user. Maybe if I was an Apple Music user, it might be different. But with Spotify, they serve me songs and playlists, and I like to create playlists, and that's where my energy goes to. And I don't sit and really listen to albums anymore. And I kind of regret that. And
even with vinyl, you put on a vinyl, it's guaranteed to.
Yeah, that's I guess the exception. I'll admit, unfortunately, I didn't bring my vinyl player when I came. I was going to be in Japan for 2 years, and I didn't haul my vinyl over here for weight restrictions. So actually, I don't have a vinyl player here. But that would be the exception, for me. Of course, if I was listening to vinyl, I'd listen to an album. Yeah. So my vinyl collection.
It's a lost art form. It's kind of sad. We're still producing them as artists, but they're not being consumed. And I think you'll look back at this as in 10 years, and we're in like this transition phase where, and speaking from experience as someone who's followed your Bandbuilder Academy and that, and I'm now switched to these Podsongs, and I won't be doing albums anymore. I'm just going to be releasing because I haven't got time, but I'll just be concentrating on, releasing 2 songs every week because this is medium that I can utilize now. So, but now from what I've learned from doing these Podsongs is that some of the songs are kind of album tracks, because normally a single is, catchy, but some of the songs can be, their stories about what I've just spoken about. So, they could be quite slow or acoustic or not something but because I'm banging out these songs, okay, oh, well, this is for this one. Okay, next one. I don't worry about every song has to be a hit single sound. You know what I mean? So it's kind of this long form album.
Well, and you could always take your Podsongs and make an album, and we have to remind ourselves that actually the album was the middle of the historic, music history. Like it was songs first. And the record sheet industry created, sheet music, right? And then, but when they started putting out vinyl records, they did have some extended play, long play stuff, but the singles were what was driving the business on airplane. It was radio singles and A-side, B-side. And then the album was kind of recreated more for financial reasons in the music industry. And I guess they stumbled into a good thing because we got some really great concept albums and works of art, like people, when they think about, pop music, pop culture and music culture, they think about the great albums of the day. And, but then we got away from that now, and we are getting away from it. And I think the thing to say here regrettably, I've stopped listening to albums, but I want to make a conscious effort to go back and do it. I'm finding myself with smartphones. It's changing a lot of my habits and my decision making. And this is a great example of where I got taken out of the habit of listening to albums and put into the habit of listening to singles solely because an algorithm on a smartphone was that was the experience it was serving me. And I just went along with it. But it reminds us that not just with music, but in all of our decision making, whether it comes to politics or coronavirus or, all of these things dealing with our news media that we're consuming, we really need to stop and make our own decisions on things. I think it's time to insert that into the conversation here because, we can't let these cell phones take over our lives. They're just tools, right? It feels like it's too late, but personally, my pledge to myself on this podcast is that I'm going to start remembering to make some decisions and put this thing down, put the cell phone down more often, and not let it distract me or make me make these decisions. So.
But it's just how form comes from function. It's when you zoom out, like you're saying, and look at it. Like albums came about because okay, we need to go in the studio and record a single. These 4 or 5 guys, the musicians, we'll pay the studio time, we'll get them in there. Oh, but while you're in there, we've paid the time, you've brought in all this heavy equipment, you might as well record some more songs. And when people go into the shop and buy it, they're going in with a bag and they're coming out, they're paying the money, they're coming out with a bag and it's a printed thing. They might as well have some more songs than just one on there. So this kind of, but now so the distribution has changed. You don't have to download, you don't have to have this physical product anymore. And also the band doesn't have to go into the studio anymore. We're all, we're all working from home anyway, recording our stuff, or using a computer. And
I agree. Yeah. I want to say, I think artists should still make albums or, groups of songs, and they should do that. I hope that they don't stop that. And because of distribution, there is some benefit to releasing tracks or your album in pieces and song by song by song. But I still hope it's in the context occasionally of an EP or an album. No matter what genre you are, I think it's nice to create a body of work that's consistent, and the energy in your studio session is there, and is found throughout your collection of songs. So I would encourage musicians to keep making albums.
Yeah, I guess like you say, there's just the format will change. It won't be these 12 songs, but there'll still be this, this, and your styles when you make this music in this style, and then your tastes change. And yeah, I guess that's pretty inevitable. But
yeah, and what's interesting is, Spotify sort of encourages more content, more singles. Daniel Ek, the CEO, got in trouble a few weeks back saying, musicians need to put out more content.
I'm doing it.
Yeah, like directing musicians on artists on how they should create and how frequently they should create, which is just overstepping his boundaries. But admittedly, like they don't hide behind the fact that they do focus on the single. But Apple came from the Steve Jobs culture of albums. When he built Apple Music and iTunes, it was very album focused. They created the eyeliners, and they had like interactive albums on iTunes, if people remember those. And it still features albums. And actually, even the way that Apple wants to receive the music from the music industry, from the artists and the labels, they want to receive them in album form or EP form. They want to support albums in the traditional album cycle. They don't have a problem with artists that want to take a singles only approach. They're fine with that too, but it would be their preference that artists sort of organize their marketing campaigns and orchestrate an album release and a cycle and have marketing and promotion, and that they kind of catch you and support you on the release date, like when all of that is coming together. Like,
but didn't you tell me Apple made a big mistake? They split up the iTunes player into the podcasts and the music.
yeah, but I think that's separate from the issue that I'm talking about. I'm just saying one platform, Spotify, is sending the signal to the music industry that put out singles, but Apple is still backing the album. They're still sending the message to creators and labels. We want albums, you know. So it's you know, the world hasn't really given up on the album yet. One half of the streaming giant hasn't. Apple hasn't given up on the album format yet. Not that Spotify has either, but they prefer the single approach, or they push it more. But what you just asked me about, you know, Apple Music's mistake, or you know, iTunes, Apple, throwing, you know, the baby out with the bathwater, to use a tasteless pun there, but I think they did, you know, with the iTunes store, you know, being not only a source of income for them and for the creators, that MP3 income that some people still like to buy MP3s. They still buy them, just like they still buy CDs. But also the miscalculation they made on them having a large market share on podcasts, on the audio product that, you know, they didn't look at podcasts as necessarily a product. And they had that market sort of cornered for a long time. And, you know, for Spotify to come in and make it part of a, you know, a paid service like they did, and go after some big talent, it's just interesting. It's ironic that around the same time that Spotify did their big Joe Rogan deal, where they signed him to a multi-billion deal or million deal, it was almost in the same month or week that the iTunes store closed down with, you know, the podcasts on there. Now you can still get to the iTunes store on some machines, but it's not visible. It's hard to find, and I just think it was a mistake. I think they're going to regret it.
So you think they're on the way out? The balance has shifted now to Spotify even more.
Well, certainly on podcasts, I think they're in jeopardy of losing major market share to not just Spotify, but all the different platforms for podcasts. I think they underestimated audio. You never heard Steve Jobs talking about how great audio was going to be. Now, keep in mind, they invented the podcast, and like, it was, I don't know if they invented that, but it was
the iPod,
called the iPod podcast. So it was their thing, but it's like, I just think when they were betting on their horses, they bet on music because it was cool, you know, and it would fit their brand. But I think that they took their eye off the ball on the podcast thing.
It's amazing how big companies, even with all this, can still make these mistakes. And I guess that just contributes to the fast-moving, crazy world we live in. You know, if these big guys make such huge mistakes, and then, you know, these little, like when a tree falls in the forest, you know, then suddenly the light's on the canopy and boom, the next one's coming up. So yeah, it's certainly an interesting time to be an independent musician. And yeah. All right. Well, I think we better start winding up here, because we need the bathroom.
Well, it's been a really interesting talk. I didn't really know where this was going to go. You know, I hope your non-musician audience enjoyed hearing a little bit behind the scenes. And for any of the musicians that you have listening in, you know, I have free advice on heatonthestreet.com, plenty of that there. For those that want to take a little bit further and treat your career more like a business, Bandbuilder Academy. You can learn about it at bandbuilderacademy.com and what I do. And I show up for everybody every day. I'm in the community. I'm there for the members. It's what I'm committed to. It's what I'm passionate about, and I want to help. So,
yeah, I can really vouch for that. I mean, you tried to give me a month's refund for some reason of something, and then I said, well, I'd rather have a chat with you about getting some advice on my podcast, and then you did that for the price of a consultancy. And you know, it's just so generous of you, and it's just like having access to you is an incredible thing. I just want to ask when the 9th stage of the roadmap will be finished.
My goal is by the October 1st. I'm really sort of putting the finishing touches on it because I want to get it out there. I want that to be out there soon. So October 1st is the goal for me.
Okay. Well, I'm
on the home stretch.
It's
all written. I got to record it, and I got to do sort of the PowerPoint type presentations. But I'm almost there. I'm getting there.
Well, it's an incredible resource, and I think I agree with you. It's an amazing time to be an independent musician. On your laptop, you can have all the software to record the music. You have access to all the Facebook advertising, the YouTube advertising tools that the big labels have. We have all these. We have the same tools at our fingertips. We just need to know, because we drift, as musicians do. We don't know how to do it. But this roadmap that you've put together is really just everything we need to do, all the boxes we need to check to get our music out there and make a living.
Awesome. Jack, man, it's been good talking to you. Thanks so much for having me on.
No, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks, Todd. I'll get to work on the song straight after this. I think I've got a great idea. I know what it has to be about. So
cool. Well, good luck with this podcast. Can't wait to hear how it comes out. And thanks again for listening and hearing my story and all that. Have a good night, man.
I will. You too.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
It's the tale of a snail in the music, speaking to you like this is very therapeutic. Nobody buys CDs, they're only streaming. Fractions of center, all I get for dreaming. One day perhaps I'll make it on a proper playlist. Glad you like my music, at least you'll join my mailing list. I'm glad you like my music, will you join my mailing list? I'll join my builder, I'm in Todd's Academy. I got the secrets of the big label strategies. I pay for algorithms, right for AIs. I'm on a left brain, right brain strategy. I'll watch the metrics, box of tricks to enlist. I'm glad you like my music, will you join my mailing list? I'm glad you like my music, will you join my mailing list? Let's keep in touch now and be like real friends. I'll be the annoying one who goes on about what's going on with them. Don't be shy, though my lyrical prowess is scary. The secret is I use a rhyming dictionary. I've got a podcast now with songs about the guest, that's the twist. You love the music, you'll sign up to the mailing list. I'm glad you like my music, will you join my mailing list? You cannot unsubscribe, request denied. I'll never cease, I'll never desist. You said you like my music, now you're on my mailing list. I've got you forever, now you're on my mailing list. Even if you die, you'll stay on my mailing list. Even on the astral, you'll be on my mailing list.
Sign up to my mailing list at podsongs.com now. Thanks to the musicians Maurizio Sarnicola, Massimino Vodza, and Dori Verba, my researcher. If you want to listen to the song after you've signed up to the mailing list, you can download it from podsongs.com, or you can stream it on Spotify, Deezer, iTunes, etc. See you next time.